Do you believe in angels? Something that you can't see or touch that you just know is looking out for you. Maybe we just don't recognize them. Makes me think of this story I heard a long time ago. It's about a man who gets stranded at sea. He's a strong believer and is absolutely sure God will save him. As he patiently waits, a man on a rowboat comes by and offers him help. He explains that God will save him and tells the man, row on. Then a motorboat comes by and offers some assistance. Again, he exclaims his faith and tells the person to motor on. Finally, a rescue helicopter comes by to save him. And once again, he turns it down as he's faithfully waiting for God to save him. No one else comes after that, and he dies. Upon meeting his maker, he explains how he lived a faithful life and thought he'd be saved. God says, "Who the hell you think sent that rowboat, that motorboat, and that helicopter?" Adjusting to vision loss and disability really does require us to see through things that we're presented in life. Find opportunities. Recognize the angels. And say thank you. Read My Mind Radio family. I'm Thomas Reed, your host and producer. And I'm thankful for you all. Get ready. We got a good one. Let's go. Read my mind. Read my mind.
Radio. My name is John Samuel, Chief Innovation Architect for LCI Tech.
As you'll soon see, his vision loss journey, which began at 9 years old, wasn't one he necessarily traveled alone.
I was living in Japan, and during the summer times, we'd come back home to the U.S., and I remember going to my uncle's house in Boston, and one summer I remember seeing the stars, and then the next summer I came back, the stars were gone. I think that was the first moment I noticed that something was changing.
John struggled to communicate the changes to his parents. The vision loss, however, continued and became more noticeable when he was in high school.
I just thought I was a bad basketball player. I thought I was a bad driver as I was getting into accidents and things like that. The fact that I was a child of Indian immigrants where the mentality is you work hard. And because I didn't have any family history of vision loss, I think it was something that my parents didn't understand that there was something wrong with my eyesight. They thought maybe I'm just not working hard in school. Maybe I'm not working hard enough at whatever it was that I was having challenges with when actually I was losing my sight. But when I got to college, that's when it was like, there's something going on here that isn't right.
Living with undiagnosed vision loss and trying to lead a normal life means John found ways to compensate, even in areas where, quite honestly, he shouldn't have.
When I was in college, I always knew what time sunset was, because if I didn't leave by dusk, I wouldn't be able to find my car. And if I did get to my car, it was too dark. I wouldn't be able to drive it. I may hit a student maybe walking on the road. At the same time, I was working part-time at Wachovia Bank as a teller. I would wait for everyone in the bank to leave. I didn't want anyone to see because I was going over curbs and everything to get onto the road. I memorized the roads. I knew where I had to go. I followed the taillights. I would just essentially tailgate somebody all the way home.
John's adaptations aren't at all uncommon. However, he describes his actions a bit differently today.
In hindsight, it's a selfish feeling of I just made it, because not only did I just make it, all those other people on the road also just made it, and they didn't even know.
While attending Virginia Commonwealth University, John was diagnosed with retinitis pigmentosa.
I did not cope with that news very well, and my actions led to me failing out of college. I found myself coming back home to North Carolina.
Watching his friends graduate from college and move into the next phase of their lives inspired John to finish up school.
I knew I wasn't going to be able to stay in North Carolina because I couldn't drive. I took an opportunity to go out to Bangalore, India, and work in corporate finance for a software company out there.
Working internationally was never foreign to John.
My parents immigrated from India in the late 60s. My dad went to college up in Massachusetts. He got a job with Nortel in Canada. That brought him down to North Carolina, where I was born. His career took him to Japan. He eventually went out to India for a few years. He was overseeing a lot of global research and development for the company. And that's where it got me my exposure to international business, which was why I knew after I graduated from college, I wanted to go international.
There was also a very practical reason.
I could get a car and driver in Bangalore, India, within my salary I was going to be making. I spent around 2 years there. I felt that it was actually the most difficult time in my career. Being an Indian American going to India, it was a different type of stigma, a different type of challenge I had to face. I was seen as an outsider in a country where my origins were from. The workplace was very challenging. They worked very long hours, but I learned a lot. And after 2 years there, I had accomplished what I wanted to there. And I decided to come back to the U.S. and I moved to New York City.
I'ma make it by any means. I got a pocket full of trees, baby. I'm from New York.
Come on, you know that was going to get a reaction from me. John worked for the city, providing financial education to city employees during the recession. This required him to travel throughout the 5 boroughs, giving him an unofficial crash course in mobility training.
How to get on a subway, to bus, to walking around, learning how to trail people, how to come up to the sidewalk, using my foot to kind of feel where curbs were, using my sense of listening to traffic patterns, using all the other senses and cues that I could pick up that weren't visual to be able to get around. And it's a skill that I cherish.
John learned about an opportunity to work for a telecom, leading a startup of a new international business. While he did share some information about his vision loss, he admits that he did not reveal the full extent of his blindness.
Night blind at that moment. During the daytime and during the interviews, they didn't see as many issues. The interview went well. They offered me the job. But we went out afterwards to go out to dinner after I signed. And that's when they realized I couldn't see.
I know you weren't taking out a white cane because it was dark.
Oh, at this time, I didn't have a white cane.
Yeah.
I wasn't using a white cane at all.
Right.
I couldn't track where people were walking in a restaurant. There was some hesitation from people within the company about sending me out to Cameroon. They essentially told me, we'll give you 6 months to go out there and do what you can, and then we'll wash our hands of the situation. You go your way and we'll go our way.
So he set out to Cameroon. And yes, the accessibility challenges began immediately.
I was flying in the middle of the night, and I got out of the airplane and got through my baggage claim, and I was coming out into the airport. And luckily, I had grown up visiting India and other emerging markets around the globe that I understood what to expect. There was a lot of people outside kind of screaming taxi and just trying to talk to you to get your attention. I heard someone say taxi. I went over to the person. I told him the hotel I was going to. He grabbed my suitcase. He started walking in front of me. And what I did was I listened to the wheel of the suitcase as he pulled it in front of me. Getting to the taxi, I felt I'm going to be okay.
He was now equipped with the travel techniques and new confidence gained in New York City. More importantly, he had an adaptive way of thinking that enabled him to find solutions. He even benefited from the new accessibility built into Windows 7, which allowed him to configure Windows in high contrast mode.
Everything I was doing was pretty much on the computer. When it came to printouts, I couldn't see that. There was a level of trust of what people were bringing to me on my team. I had an admin. I'd send her the document. She'd print it out. It was interesting. Another contrast level. My admin was black, and so her skin tone against the white paper also allowed me to know where I needed to sign.
Throw in a mouse that gave him quick access to the built-in zoom features of Windows 7, and John had most administrative tasks covered. For the rest, well, some may say he was lucky, but John and I are going with he has angels.
One day, I was standing out looking for a taxi, and a taxi driver drove by. He had somebody in the car. He told me, go back inside the hotel. I will be right back. And he dropped off the person he was driving, came back, got me from inside the hotel, and he never left my side. And his name is Blaze. I joked. He became my CTO. my chief transport officer. When I went into a restaurant or bar, he was always a few stools away from me. He would always watch my back when I went out in the streets of Cameroon. Even when I came out of the airplane traveling, he was always waiting for me so that no one could take advantage of me.
Even when it came down to finding office space for the business, something greater was guiding him.
It just happened that I found a building. It was a new building in Cameroon, in Douala, that had 2 towers. One tower was for offices. The other tower was residential. I happened to get an apartment in one tower and get the office in the other tower. So my commute was nothing. I just literally went down to the basement, like ground floor, in the elevator, walked across, and went back up.
John made sure to note another part of the success equation.
My team, it was something we never talked about, my vision loss. What I learned in Africa was that in Cameroon and across the continent, there's a loyalty for the family. Our team was a family, and they were very protective of me, and they took care of me.
Now, watch what happens when talent and teamwork meet reasonable accommodations and access.
Within 14 months from that experience, we generated $12 million in revenue and $2.4 million in profit.
Naturally, after building a successful business, what does John do?
I took 6 months to go travel the world.
That international travel was already in his blood. Plus, he had personal goals when he set out for Cameroon.
I wanted to be a top 30 executive under the age of 30. The other goal was I wanted to reach the top of Mount Kilimanjaro, the highest point in Africa. It was much more difficult for me than I ever imagined.
It's about 5 days of climbing before the final summit. In order to reach the top at sunrise, you have to complete the final trek at night.
My friend suggested that we take the headlamp off my head and switch the color to a red light, and we put it on the foot of the guide in front of me. I was able to follow this red light to the top of the mountain, just like how I used to drive home.
Following his time in Africa, John was ready to return to the States and pursue an MBA. Why would you want to go back to business school? Because you just built a business.
I think there's 2 aspects of this. One goes back to that Indian immigrant upbringing, where education is the most important thing. The fact that I had failed out in undergrad, the fact that I was never a stellar student, me getting an MBA was validation. It was something that I felt like I wanted to do to prove to myself that I could do it. Show my parents, I did this.
Even though John's work experience included corporate treasury and currency hedging in India, along with providing financial education in New York City, he was concerned about competing with his peers for a spot in an MBA program.
Not to mention, I thought if a university found out that I couldn't see, I thought that would be a liability.
During the first week of the MBA program, just another stop along his journey, he's greeted by an angel guiding his way.
It was a roundtable event where we had guest speakers and there were assigned seats for all of us. They had name cards where we had to go sit. I couldn't see where my name was. So I turned to the person next to me and I asked him, I can't see my name card. Can you help me? And it happened to be the dean of the business school, the associate dean, Liesl Riddle, who was standing next to me. And she was the same person who had recruited me to come to George Washington University. And she had no idea I couldn't see. She just opened up and made me feel so comfortable and supportive about talking about my vision loss. And she introduced me to Disability Student Services. They were very supportive. I started being much more open about talking about my vision loss with my classmates. The fact that I was able to be my true self, my authentic self, I was able to open up my heart, and I met my wife in grad school.
Do you know anything about the dean in terms of her familiarity with disability, the fact that she opened up like that? Do you have any insight about why that was?
Yeah, and that's a fantastic question, because at the time I didn't know, but she actually has a son who has special needs. She could empathize with me. She understood the challenges. She's just such a loving person and is one of my biggest supporters and advocates in my life.
And you just happen to be standing next to her. There's such a pattern with
right,
you.
I know, man. I can't make this up. I got angels all over the place, and
you sure
it really
do.
is something special. And I am thankful. That is one thing I'll tell you. I am thankful because I am not the smartest person. I'm not the best person, but I have the best people around me. I have the smartest people around me, and that's what I'm blessed for.
That must be why they continue to appear for you, because you acknowledge it and you're thankful. John began grad school with a high level of confidence. Yet, as he approached graduation, interviewing for different positions, he wasn't finding much success. With an assist from the dean, he landed a position in a crowdfunding company. He worked there for 3 years until the company folded. Meanwhile, he and his wife, Nicole, built a home in the Washington, D.C. area and were expecting their first child. Stack these 3 life events together, and you can imagine what you get.
Immense stress. And it caused my vision to deteriorate even faster. At this time, I was still using that inverted color screen. The magnification was getting much bigger, but it was getting to a point where I couldn't see the screen. I fell into really dark times. I hadn't felt this bad since I first found out
about his vision loss diagnosis. Then a friend sent him an article about a new software developed at SAS using sound design to help non-visually access graphs and charts.
It was designed by a guy named Ed Summers, who had the same eye condition as me and lived in my hometown in North Carolina. Up until this point, I had never met another blind person, and I knew I had to get in touch with this guy.
He tried unsuccessfully for months. His wife, Nicole, decided if Ed could live in North Carolina, then maybe they can too.
So we found a house online and we told my parents, and they got so excited. They never thought I was coming home. So as we're talking to my dad on the phone, he jumped in the car and started driving to go look at his house. And as he was driving, he started yelling at something. Oh, there's a blind guy in the road. Maybe it's the guy you're trying to get in touch with. Gets out of the car, walks over to this guy and says, "Are you Ed Summers?" And the guy says, "Hold up. Yes, I am." My dad just puts the phone in his ear and says, "My son's trying to reach you." After apologizing to him profusely, he agreed to meet me, and I came down to meet him. He understood where I was coming from and where I was going. And we were having coffee, and he was making all these introductions and sending out all these emails. And I'm wondering, how's he doing this with an iPhone? I had no idea about VoiceOver. And he's just speeding along, making all these messages. That's what was really the introduction of accessibility to me.
John continued traveling monthly to North Carolina in order to meet with Ed. John had his own entrepreneurial ideas.
I want to make sunglasses. I want them to be made by somebody who is blind. Because if I could give someone a job, I could give them hope. I could give them a life. And that could be generational impact. And I was talking to Ed about this, and he introduced me to the president of LCI, who knew that the largest employer of Americans who were blind was just 7 miles from where I grew up.
In July 2017, John met with the president of LCI, Jeffrey Harding, to discuss his idea of manufacturing sunglasses. Jeffrey, however, was interested in creating more technology service jobs. The two agreed to keep in touch. Meanwhile, John had taken Ed's advice and had been pursuing positions at companies seeking to hire candidates under diversity and inclusion initiatives.
If I can't find a job with my education, my experience, and my privilege, I can only imagine what other people who are blind were going through to find a job.
On August 4th, 2017, John and his family moved to North Carolina despite not having a job.
One piece of advice that Ed told me was that if you want to continue your career trajectory, you're going to have to learn as a person who's blind. I said, all right, I'm going to learn how to use the screen reader. And that was the day I said, no more using my eyes. That was August 4th. That happened to be the same day that Jeffrey sent me an email saying there was a job opportunity. I joined LCI to start up a new technology service business, which is now known as LCI Tech.
All of this in just 6 months after first reading the article about Ed Summers and SAS software.
I went from the darkest moment in my life to the start of a new chapter that has given me a new perspective on life and a life that I could not even imagine with less sight and more opportunities.
Talk to me about those 6 months, because I know how you felt. To go through and get to that point in 6 months, I mean, you had to be flying.
You're right. From the darkest moments, there was lots of tears. And that's when you know you have a great partner. Our first son was born in February. March 11th when I got that article. And there were lots of tears. I was having so many accessibility challenges. It would literally take me the entire day to complete one application for a job. Nicole would, after her maternity leave, go to work, pick up the baby from daycare, nurse the baby, do all the mom stuff, and then apply for jobs for me. That's an amazing partner. She was doing that every day. I wasn't getting any responses. Nothing. I didn't get a single interview.
I just want to be clear about this. So you were contacting places that were looking for diversity. The diversity that you were going in as, because you're Indian American, you said, right? You were specifically saying visually impaired, blind, whatever.
At this point, after meeting Ed, I was now saying I am blind. But I feel like I wasn't checking a box that they wanted to check off. And I was reaching out to all these folks talking about disabilities and helping with jobs. Nothing. I think that's also what's been fueling me towards what I'm doing today and the change that I want to make.
Talk to me about what you're doing at LCI Tech.
Our whole mission is to create employment for people who are blind and the broader disability community in the knowledge economy. These are service-based jobs, technology-based jobs. These are jobs that are paying. My hope is to get people paid and get people into a much more comfortable life. Our goal at LCI Tech is to make sure that people who are blind don't miss out on all aspects of life. We're doing that in 3 ways: by eliminating the digital divide, creating pathways for employment, and by changing the mindsets of people and companies.
So let's take the first one, the digital divide.
We need to be able to address the digital accessibility piece by hiring people who can conduct tests and assessments of digital content. That's the first line of business that we're starting. The hope is that by having a team of accessibility professionals, we can then go into companies and help make sure that their processes and procedures are accessible and accommodating for people of all abilities.
Let's say LCI Tech's mission of making sure blind people aren't missing out on life is an apple pie. The recipe, therefore, is the 3 ways John mentioned. That first, tackling the digital divide, is like the pie shell. The recipe calls for preparing the shell in order to add the delicious filling. In this case, that's creating pathways to employment.
A pre-employment workforce development program, making sure that young people who are in high school, thinking about going into college or going into the workforce, that they're going to have the job skills that they need to be able to go into them and also be successful at it. So that includes soft skills and technical skills. My hope is to first get it working in the state of North Carolina, and then this model should be able to be scaled across the nation.
The idea here is to provide students with year-round opportunities to gain real-world experience, teaching not only the technical skills, but also things like interacting with others and all the soft skills that go along with that.
Whether it be through an internship or some type of real-life scenario where students are taking what they just learned and putting it to action and seeing what the outcomes look like. I hope to bring in companies and businesses into this whole learning process. So not only are students getting to interact with professionals, but companies are also going to build that empathy of understanding the talents of students with disabilities and students who are blind.
Learning from the success of other programs and experts, John's in no way trying to reinvent the wheel. In putting together this proof of concept, he's starting at home.
The superintendent of Wake County Public Schools was actually my vice principal when I was in high school. She had no idea I couldn't see when I met her recently. The only reason she took the meeting was that she remembered my name. And the only reason she knew my name was because I got in trouble when I was in high school. If I was a good kid and didn't get in trouble, I would never have gotten that meeting.
All right, one up for the bad kids. Me? No, I wouldn't know anything about that. Continuing with that pie recipe, if that shell and filling doesn't properly bake at the right temperature, therefore creating an aroma that makes your mouth water, well, you're probably not going to be asked to make it again.
The third piece is changing the mindsets in people and companies. So working with companies to make sure that every touch point that they have with somebody from recruitment to hiring to onboarding to promoting, working with them to ensure that they have a strategy to properly execute a disability hiring program. Eventually, it just becomes ingrained into their entire hiring process so that it becomes universal to set everyone up for success.
How do you sell that?
I call it, gotta find companies who get it. The initial companies we're going to be working with are companies who get it, who want it, and who have the capacity to do it. You can get it and you can want it, but if you can't put that time and funding to do this, then that's not what we need to be focusing on right now. We need to find those companies who have those three things. We build on that model. We get that case study. And if we show the proven model, others will follow. We've got a couple of partners right now that we're working with too. I'm really excited about. Hopefully next time we talk, I'll be able to talk more about it.
That part is really interesting to me because that's sort of a piece of what I want the podcast to do, right? That change the misperceptions and all of that. And that's kind of what you're doing when you go in, when you talk about that. And so I want to know more about that, man, when you can talk about it.
Now, for sure. I mean, part of the communication piece is the trainings that we do. You kind of have your traditional learning management system trainings, podcasts, blogs, all these different types of content. That's how we're going to change the stigma. That's how people take in and consume learnings and trainings. Your podcast is going to be part of that ecosystem, right? That's what we need because that's how we're going to change the stigma.
That pie smells sweet. As part of this effort, John has launched his own interview show on YouTube, All Access with John Samuel.
It's a show really about sharing the stories of leaders, entrepreneurs, advocates who are improving the lives of people of all abilities. Similar vein of what you're doing is breaking down those barriers so that people can see that, hey, there's a lot of different types of people out there, different leaders, different people doing some cool stuff out there. And we just don't know about them. We need to share those stories. We need to give them a platform. That's why I'm so thankful for you to give me this platform. One thing I appreciate with yours is that I love the sound engineering. There's an auditory experience, which is awesome.
Cool. I appreciate that. John literally traveled across the globe, gaining a little more understanding about his own vision loss at each of his destinations. Now he finds himself back home, where he began his vision loss journey. As a 9-year-old, he wasn't equipped with the language to explain what he was experiencing. He internalized it and managed the best he could. Now he's back at home working to make sure others with vision loss can find opportunities a bit closer to home.
Having gone through this myself, who knows it better, right? We talk about all those angels and all those serendipitous meetings. Me being able to come back home to a place where I never thought I could live and to be able to make this type of change, it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, you get to be the angel.
Yeah, it's paying it forward, right? I can never thank all those people who helped me get here, but maybe I can help someone else.
Salutes to John Samuel, the latest member of the Read My Mind Radio family. You know you want to learn more about him and the work happening at LCI Tech.
Visit www.lcitech.com. And we're also on LinkedIn and Twitter, LCI_tech.
And are you yourself on Twitter?
My handle is @JohnGSamuel, @JOHN, the letter G, SAMUEL. That's the same for Twitter and Instagram.
What an amazing story. If you're familiar with the book, The Alchemist, by Paulo Coelho, you probably already made the connection. If you haven't read it, give it a try. If you're a person adjusting to vision loss or disability in general, I'd love to hear what lessons you take away from his story. Do you hang out on Twitter? I'm at TS Reed. Drop me an email at readmymindradio@gmail.com. Leave me a voicemail at 570-798-7343. Then call or text a friend and tell them what's happening here on Read My Mind Radio. Tell them it's available wherever they get podcasts. And remember, transcripts and more are over at readmymind.com. And yes, tell them that's R to the E-I-D.
D, and that's me in the place to be.
Like my last name. Peace.